All right. Well, just like to welcome you on behalf of the iMoot team. Just want to say thank you to Justin. And for everyone, if you don't know Justin, I'm sure he'll introduce himself. But he's heavily involved in doing all sorts of development and plugins, which you can find at Moodle.org. So he's someone very qualified to be talking on this subject. So Justin, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Shane. Okay. Thanks everybody for coming along to the session. I usually talk about Poodle because the main set of plugins that I write is called Poodle, and there's 5 or 6, or more, probably more plugins in that set. But today I'm just diverting from that, and I'm not going to talk just about Poodle. I'm going to talk about how to write plugins in general. I've been using Moodle. I've only been using Moodle, I guess, for 6 years. I know some people here have probably been using it for longer than that. But I started writing plugins almost immediately because when I first started, I was looking for something to do audio recording in classes, and I came across Moodle and I wrote an audio recording plugin, and we just started going from there, really. Today I'm going to talk about how to write plugins, and I'm really aiming this at people who probably already know how to program a little bit or how to use PHP, how to write on PHP, but are not so familiar with how to write a plugin in Moodle, or aren't so familiar with developing in Moodle. Because I know when I started, although I did know how to program, a lot of what I was doing was kind of in a cloud. I didn't really understand the container in which I was writing plugins for. And once it took me a long time really to clear up a lot of that fog. If I'd probably taken a more structured approach to learning how to write a plugin before I began, I think I would have had a shorter an easier route, really. So hopefully I can get some of you along the path. Perhaps if you can just write there in your chat area, can you just write in here if you do know how to write a program or write something in PHP? Can you just write that in the chat area there so I can just get an indication? Okay, that's great. All right. Okay. Perl. Well, it's kind of like Perl, isn't it? PHP. Perl on speed. Okay, good. All right. Okay, so if you're starting out, actually writing plugins is a really good way to start because it's a small unit. You don't have to write a big program, and you get a lot of mileage out of a small bit of code. And Moodle is actually a really good place to write plugins. So let me just show you some of my plugins. Okay, so these are some of the ones that I've written. It's not all of them. These are most of them. Or I think most of these are actually on Moodle.org. 1 or 2 of them are not for various reasons, but usually just because I wasn't sure the Moodle.org was the best fit for them. But I've written plugin for the Moodle filter type and the assignment submission type, question types, the new Atto editor, which is the replacement for the TinyMCE HTML editor in Moodle 2.7. I've written a number of plugins for the TinyMCE editor, which I'll have to move over to Atto now. I've written a portfolio plugin, some activity modules, and a feedback plugin. Okay, so yeah, so I've been quite busy with these, and actually as development has gone on, I've found that actually I'm so busy maintaining all these plugins that I've written that it's actually hard to get the time to write new ones or to do some of the things that I'd really like to do. I'm in a bit of a pickle now, but never mind. Okay, so let's just talk a little bit about Moodle and plugins. So Moodle actually stands for Modular Object-Oriented Dynamic Learning Environment. Now I'm not fooled by that. I reckon Martin Duguay probably came up with the word Moodle first, and then he went and figured out the words to go in there. I bet my hat on that, and the fact that there's a big M and a big D in there for Martin Duguay doesn't escape my attention either. But the key thing here is this modular, all right, which means that there are lots of little parts that make up Moodle, and those parts are pluggable, so you can take them out or put them back in again, and everything will still work. So Moodle is very modular, and that's I think that's been a key to the fact that Moodle has been adopted so widely around the world is because it's very flexible, and you can, if it doesn't do what you want, you can add the features that you need or alter the existing behavior. And that's the beauty of Moodle, really, I think, and that's also attributed to being open source, which of course really gives you that freedom. Now, in fact, Moodle is almost all plugins. It's amazing, really. Most of the things that you use in Moodle are, in fact, plugins. They're just core plugins that are maintained by Moodle HQ. So you've got the workshop module, the wiki, the URL resource, survey activity, quiz, even the quiz, the forums, all of that. Those are all plugins, and they're activity module plugins. So there are a number of Moodle plugin types, and just one of those types is activity module, but it's probably the most visible type because that's where most of us spend our time. But yeah, most of Moodle is in fact plugins, which is surprising really, but it also explains some of how it's come to be, you know, how there's so many developers working on it and so many people participating. How many plugin types do you think there are in Moodle? That's the question I want to ask now. So what you see here, wiki, URL, survey, SCORM, resource, these are not plugin types, these are just plugins, but activity module is the plugin type. How many plugin types do you think there actually are? Would you like to just type that in there? Just have a guess. What do you think? Keep it low, and then it'll look really good when I give you the actual answer. $12, $15, $14, $20. Okay. Well, that's good. Well, I went, before this presentation, I actually went and I counted them all, and there are, in fact, 39. There are 39 plugin types. So it's a huge number, and if you want to actually, you know, go and check that for yourself, you can see there, docs.moodle.org dev plugins. There's an enormous number of plugin types. Most of them, I guess, are a little bit underused in terms of plugins. You don't find many people writing, you know, plugins for some of them. But others, like the activity module or the question type, there's a lot of plugin types. What this means really is that when you're stuck or when you need some, you know, to see how other people do these things, just think about how it's actually done in some other place of Moodle that you're familiar with, and then go find whatever plugin type that is and have a look, and you'll find, you know, that's really the best way to learn how to write plugins or how other people have written plugins, because it's all there for you to see, and it's really good. I want to talk now a little bit about the development environment. So I'll talk a little bit about how I develop, and I'll talk about how other people develop. But there are two main ways you're going to be programming. One of them is within an IDE, and one of them is using a programmer's text editor. Now the IDE is, you know, it's integrated development environment, and that's got all the features that you could need. It's got an integrated Git client, and it's got debugging, and it'll do source code lookup, and it'll do code completion. So it's really powerful, and if you're familiar with the IDE that you're using, it's really, really good. But the drawback, of course, of an IDE is that it can be a bit confusing for newbies, because there's already a lot to learn, and then you have to learn how to use the IDE as well. So the alternative to that is to use a programmer's text editor, which is just a regular text editor, but it has, you know, a few features that programmers find handy. For example, syntax highlighting, so that it'll make variables in different colors to strings and things like that. Also, you can do things like perhaps have two windows open on the same screen, and or they have the same file open at two different places on the same screen, and things like that. So that's kind of the limited features of a programmer's text editor. But of course, the good thing is that they are simple and reasonably easy to use. For myself, I prefer to use the programmer's text editor and just a FTP client, and I just constantly edit in the editor and then update with FTP, check it on the browser. However, if I'm really getting down and dirty into something that's quite intense, you know, I'll swap over and use an IDE. And the IDE that I use is NetBeans. But the others that people use are Eclipse and PHP Storm. Actually, people really rave about PHP Storm, but it's not free. It's unfree. I don't even know how much it is. One day I'm going to download it and have a look at it, but I haven't done that yet. Okay. Does anybody who is a programmer or has done some programming have a preference? What do you guys use? Do you want to just type that in there for me? I'm here to say VI. Right. Oh, good. Okay. Bluefish. Oh, yeah, I've seen Bluefish. That's fine. The text editor, isn't it? Good. Yeah, on Windows I like to use Notepad++. I actually prefer that to Text Wrangler, but I do most of my work on Mac. So I use Text Wrangler probably more often. All right, that's good. So for new programmers, there are a few new programmers here, I guess. I'll just tell you a little bit of my advice, really. It's just my personal preference is not, you have to take it too seriously. Use a programmer's text editor plus FileZilla, which is the neat thing about FileZilla, I find, is you can just right-click on a file and click View Edit, and then it'll open up in your programmer's text editor. You can edit it. When you save it, FileZilla prompts you to upload it, so there's no kind of extra clicks. It's very fast. I prefer this to an IDE, especially for new people, just because there's less things to learn, and I think sometimes if you start on an IDE, people actually don't really have a fuller understanding of what the IDE is doing for them. And it's not so good in the future. I keep a piece of pen and paper handy. I always have a piece of paper on my desk, and then as I'm coding, I take little notes about what I'm doing. Often it's just because, I might rename a function or a file somewhere, and I might be doing 3 or 4 things at the same time, and rather than keep all that in my head and the risk of forgetting to go and update the name of the function in another location, I just make notes. I take lots and lots of notes. I throw the pieces of paper away at the end. When you get stuck, post on a forum and then go and do something else. The reason is, if you give yourself a bit of time, often the answer comes to you, and just bashing your head away at some problem and not being able to get any headway for a couple of hours, it really drains your energy. And in actual fact, you could probably use your time better by going and doing something else and letting your mind just kind of work on it in the background. The other thing is that when you post on a forum, the process of writing a forum post and actually methodically going through and describing your problem, it really works to prompt your mind, and you'll often actually come up with a solution as you're writing the post. I've often had this situation. And of course, if you use the Moodle.org forums, there's a lot of people who really do know what they're talking about, and you might get a pretty good answer back pretty quickly. I also keep a set of cheat sheets handy for JavaScript and PHP and Git, and you can get cheat sheets at cheatography.com. So they just contain basic things you often seem to have to look up. I never remember if needle or haystack comes first when I'm doing str replace, and just little things like that. So I keep those on a little cheat sheet, and I add my own notes to them. And especially with Moodle, read other people's code, because there's a lot of people have written really good code for Moodle, and they use all the right APIs and the right ways of doing things, and so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. If you just check what other people are doing, you'll often shortcut your own time, shortcut the time that you need to use to write these plugins. And ask a lot of stupid questions, because they're not really stupid. If you don't know the answer, you might as well ask it. All right, okay, let's get on to the guts of it, really. How to start? Well, that's the big thing. So you have an idea about something that you want to make, and how do you get going with that? Well, there's 3 options really. One is to copy an existing mod that does something very similar to what you're trying to do, and that's a good option. Another is to use a template, because there are some templates for various plugin types. The third option that you might do is to just code from scratch, just open up the text editor and make files and put it all in. I suggest you don't do that, just because you don't really need to, and it just increases the amount of time it takes and the chance of making little mistakes and errors. There's probably a mod that gets very close to what you need already, and if there isn't, there might be a template that you can use. So the basic process that I use when I write a plugin is I download a template or a similar mod, I rename it, then I install it, make sure it's all running and everything's working, there's no errors, everything's kind of correct, and then I start modifying it. I think that's probably a fairly common process. If you're going to use a template, there's probably more templates. I could only find 3: activity module, question type, and block. Now, I have a couple of templates of my own that I use for some of the modules that I've written a lot of. So just last night, I was up till 3 a.m. Because I intended to make an Atto plugin in this presentation and show you how I do that. So I made an Atto template from a plugin that I've written for Atto, the new Moodle 2.7 editor. So I think it's the first Atto plugin. I think it's the world first Atto plugin template. But the others that you might use are an activity module. There's a template there on GitHub. There's a question type module also on GitHub. And there's a block module also on GitHub. So those are good places to start off your development. And in actual fact, I think the activity module, the question type, and the block are far and away the 3 most common plugin types. So it makes sense that there's templates for those. So now, how are you going to rename these templates so that all the files are for the correct thing? Well, you can use your IDE or programmer's text editor. That's really the best way, because almost any programmer's text editor, or almost any IDE will have a feature to search in files and replace strings. So in Text Wrangler, I think that's called multi-file search, and in Notepad++, I think it's called find in files, and on NetBeans or Eclipse, you'll certainly have that feature in there also. The one that they recommend on the templates when you look at the READMEs is this. Well, I shouldn't say they recommend them. I suppose it's the lowest common denominator, really. Anybody can get on the command line and do this, so you can use this command line. But really, I think most of us would find that a bit tricky. That's not how I work, but it does work. I have done it, but it's not really how I do it. Or you could open up each file by hand and just do a search and replace with your text editor. That's actually not so slow. There's other ways of doing it. Now, I was actually going to show you how I do this at the end, but perhaps I'll just drop into screen sharing mode now and show you how I'm going to rename a template using Text Wrangler. So let's do that now. I'll level up. I'll share my desktop. Here we go, leveling up. Let's see if I can make this bigger somehow. How do I make this bigger? Oh, sure. Well, I'll just leave it as that, actually. Yeah, start sharing. Okay, so now I have
Hi, Justin. This is Fred. Can you hear me? It might be that your audio just cut out for a moment. If you could just click the headset icon, you'll leave the audio bridge, and then click it again, you'll come back. I'm going to see if I can get his attention here. Justin, I just took over presenter control. Justin's probably wondering why. Okay, there he goes. I think he's just going to refresh, and he should come back. No, he just refreshed. And honestly, you know, if anything happens, just refresh the browser. Usually things go quite well, but if you refresh, you come right back in. You don't have to log in again. We'll just stand by and wait for him to come back. I don't know that it's screen change, Teresa. Every now and then we see like the audio will just stop transmitting. He is a bit far away from the server. He's in Japan or on the other side of the world, but everything was going pretty well. So I don't think we'll have any trouble getting back in. And then we'll just pick up where he left off. Probably just logging all the way back out and all the way back in, which is no problems. Teresa, Shane, if you have his email, you might just want to just send him a quick email. Let him know that the session's running, everything's fine. Oh, there he comes back. Hang on. So we see him appear in the user's window. It usually just takes a moment for the client to finish loading, and then he'll join the audio. Hi, Justin.
I think I'm back. Sorry, my Mac just completely blew up there, so I am now on my Windows machine. Okay.
Okay. We noticed that your audio dropped out, so I took over presenter control to kind of get your attention, but I'm just going to make you presenter again.
Okay.
And you should be able to share your desktop and just pick out where you left off.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. So I'm very, very sorry for the issue there. Yeah, I just lost I think the audio went and then everything just blew up. So, and I tried to get back in and my Mac wasn't going to let me. So I actually set up my Windows machine ready to go on just in case, so that was good. But it still took a while. Sorry about that. I probably won't share my screen again. I'm too scared, so I'm just going to keep on going. Sorry, Fred. There's a fair bit to get through.
Don't worry, Justin. You can do it. It will work. It was working really good.
Okay. All right. Well,
totally cool. Let's
totally cool.
Things
Okay.
happen
All right.
and just keep going.
Okay. Okay. So I did in fact rename that be fearless and share. Yeah. I'm gonna be fearless. Okay, so I did rename that folder there, and we saw that in real time. But let's continue anyway. Now, so you've renamed your file and you're ready to go. But in order to actually modify those files, it's really tempting to just jump straight in there and start modifying things and going nuts. But I think the mistakes that I made initially were really because I didn't actually understand a lot of what I was modifying. I kind of knew a little bit and I could make it work, but it wasn't always the way it was supposed to be done in the Moodle world. And later on, it came back to bite me in different ways. So now I'm a good programmer now, but I wasn't always. I tried to just do things my way, and then later on, I realized that this wasn't the Moodle way at all. So I've learned my lessons. So I'm going to show you a little bit now about the structure of a Moodle plugin and how it should be. So this is the contents of the Moodle database activities folder. I've trimmed it back a little bit. There's probably more folders in there that are not common. They're specific to the database activity. These ones that you see here are, for the most part, files that you'll see in many plugins. Many plugin types have these files. This is an activity type, and activity types have certain files that are probably unique to them, or other plugins don't always have them. This is a good one to work with because it covers most of the ones that you're going to find in different plugins. You see we've got a backup folder, we've got the styles here, we've got a DB folder, a language folder, Pix folder, Module.JS, which contains some JavaScript, and a few other things. But I'm going to go through now and just explain what those different files do. Version.PHP. This is usually a very short file, but it's really important. It's got really critical information in there, and if you get this wrong, things just don't work very well. So Moodle uses the version number in here to install and upgrade the plugin. So if, for example, you have made some changes in your plugin, and then you expect Moodle to notice them, but it doesn't notice them, specifically with JavaScript and sometimes with database upgrades, that will probably be because you have forgotten to increment the version number. And if you're working with the template for the new module, for the activity module, then the version number is actually set to 0. So you actually have to go in there and set the correct version number, or Moodle won't install it for you. And it, in fact, doesn't even complain. It just doesn't install it for you. And you spend 10 minutes figuring out why it hasn't noticed your plugin. But it's because you haven't put the correct version number in there. Also in the version.php, you can set dependencies on Moodle versions. So if you don't want your plugin to be installed in, for example, Moodle 2.2, you can set a dependency for Moodle 2.3 or greater. And I do this a lot with my plugins because there are API changes in Moodle that can actually really blow up other people's Moodle accounts if your plugin doesn't play nicely. So for one of my plugins, a repository plugin, if you try to install the 2.3 version in Moodle 2.2, it actually blows up their Moodle, and it's a really bad thing to do. So you don't want anybody to get in that situation. So you can set dependencies on Moodle versions. You can also set dependencies on other plugins in the Poodle filter, which contains all the core functions for my Poodle set of plugins. I have basically all the Chopo files and all the JavaScript files, and everything's all in the Poodle filter. And the other plugins just depend on that. So if the filter is not installed, they won't. You can't install the other plugins either. You can register a cron callback with Moodle here, which is a really neat thing to do. So if you want your plugin to be, to do something every 15 minutes or every day, then you can register a cron callback. And here you must and should declare your plugin's FRANKENSTYLE component name. I'll talk about that in a minute. But if version.php doesn't exist or is poorly defined, Moodle won't forgive you. So it's really short and really simple, but get it right. And sometimes, even though your plugin will install and play nicely on machines, when you go to upload your plugin to the Moodle plugins database, Moodle will actually complain because certain information is not in your version.php or your version.php doesn't say what it expects it should say. For example, if you don't have the precise Moodle version, if you just have like a revision version number, it may not accept that. Okay, so here is your plugin's FRANKENSTYLE component name. So you really need to get this right. This is Moodle plugins need a unique component name, and it must follow the correct naming convention. So the actual name, you know, the username, the name that everybody sees, and I think even the folder name doesn't have to follow this, but the actual component name, which is used all over the show, you'll see later on when we look at some code, the component name is everywhere. It should begin with the plugin type, and then an underscore, and then the plugin name. So for example, the database activity, that is mod underscore data. The ordering question type is queue type underscore order. And filter underscore Poodle is the Poodle filter type. Yeah, it's not always clear, you know, what that stub should be. Should it be mod or question type or queue type or assign submission or asig sub? You know, what should you actually put in there? You can't make it up, so you better get it right. So look at other plugins in the plugin directory for that plugin type. And once you make your component name and you install it, you can't change it again. Because Moodle will see that as a new plugin, as a different plugin, and it will wonder where the old one's gone. And this actually happened to me once. I had a big problem related to the next step here. We've got keep it to 28 characters or fewer. You may think 28 characters is a long name for a plugin. What kind of silly twit would actually make it 30 characters or something? Well, the problem is that sometimes the stub is really, really long. And so, for example, for the assignment submission, it starts with mod underscore assign submission underscore, and then comes your plugin name. So even though it's 28 characters, when you make an assignment submission type, you actually haven't got a whole lot of characters to work with. And so I called mine mod assign submission online Poodle because the regular text assignment type is called online text. I just called it online Poodle. But that's actually 29 characters. And Moodle won't complain. It actually lets you install that, and that's fine. But when I went to install my plugin on the plugin, or upload it to the plugins database on Moodle.org, it complained because it was greater than 28 characters, and they have some requirements because some databases have a limit on field names or table names at 28 characters. And the problem here was that now I couldn't put my plugin on the Moodle.org plugins database, but I couldn't change the name either because people were already using my plugin all over the show, and I couldn't actually change the name of my plugin because the component name can't be changed. They couldn't then upgrade their way out of the situation because the plugin name is the key, the component name is the key to upgrading. So I was in a real pickle there, and so for a long time my assignment submission type was not on Moodle.org, and in the end they made a change to things. So if you change the table name to 28 characters only, it would go through. So anyway, the long and short of that is just keep your plugin name reasonably short. Okay, now one of the other things that you notice in the activity module plugins is they've got a local lib.php and a lib.php. And you think, well, what's the difference? You know, why I've got two of these things, and why can't I just stick it all in one? And when should I use one, and when should I use the other? And for a long time, I didn't really, really know what was going on here. But it goes like this: Moodle loads lib.php all the time. That's the one that it loads when it's building menus or when it's looking for shared functions. It's looking for to do different things, back up and restore and stuff like that. It uses lib.php. But when local lib.php is just used by your plugin when you're doing, when somebody's loaded it on the page and they're doing stuff, and you want to just functions that are specific to your plugin. But things that the container, Moodle as a container, needs to know about, they should be in lib.php. And this is critical really because LIB.PHP is loaded all the time. So if you start including things in there, like I'm going to include the Zend library, or I'm going to include this, this jQuery thing here, and I'm going to include this, that means every time Moodle loads up, it's going to load that thing that you've included. So you shouldn't really include anything in LIB.PHP. In fact, you should do it the other way around. You should load all of those libraries in LOCALLIB.PHP, and then if you need to, you can include LIB.PHP in LOCALLIB.PHP, but not the other way around. Okay, so never include LOCALLIB.PHP in LIB.PHP. Does that make sense? So that's the main difference. And actually, if you look at the LIB.PHPs of other plugins of the type that you are creating, you'll see a lot of interesting things in there. So it really pays to actually go in there and see what other people are doing. I remember at one point I had a situation where my plugin was to display a file that had been uploaded. I had all sorts of problems, and I was wondering where it was all happening. Where was it going? And when I went all the way through the various the steps in the stack, I went all the way through to the lib directory and the plugin file .lib.php, and came all the way back, and it came all the way back to my own plugins lib.php, where there was my plugin name _plugin file that was serving up this this file. So it was actually right in front of my nose and very, very easy for me to do. Moodle had laid it all out for me how to serve up my own files. I just wasn't familiar enough with lib.php to know that was where it was happening. So keep an eye on lib.php for the other plugins in your plugin type. Okay, and settings.php. So this is something I think that probably the templates should all have, but they don't all have, and I think it's quite, I don't know, it's fairly simple, but I remember when I was first getting started, I couldn't figure out how to do this. Is you want to set something up, you want to have an admin settings page that users can set basic information like, for example, if it's logging into YouTube, you can put the admin YouTube account and YouTube password, or if you want to hide a particular feature of your plugin and let the administrator turn that on or turn it off, then you'll put that here in settings.php. And then you pick it up again in your app, or even in another, or in your plugin, sorry, or even in another plugin. Get config, then your component name, remember your FRANKENSTYLE component name, and then the setting name. So I use this a lot to set up defaults. So when the user adds an instance of some activity module that I've written, they get to choose various parameters for that activity module, but I actually allow the administrator to set those defaults on the settings.php page for the module. And modForm.php, this is I just spoke about actually. This is the instance settings for your plugin. So what you just saw on the previous screen is the admin settings. So the administrator sets those, and those are site-wide. Okay, so teachers may not actually be able to set those if the teacher doesn't have administrator rights. But the instance settings, so when the user actually creates an instance of your activity module, then they see modForm.php. And so in here is where you set up all the settings that the teacher might see, and you can pull in those defaults that we just created in settings.php, so that it's pre-filled in for your teacher. And you fetch those settings using the instance object. So in most of the modules, you can just create an instance of your object, so you can create an object that represents your instance. So in the quiz, it's just quiz, and then just access it as a member of that object variable. Module.js. So this is where Moodle stores the JavaScript. So where you should store your JavaScript for Moodle. And this is actually really this is really important. So initially, I'd read about this Module.js and how to use it, and I thought, oh yeah, who cares? I'll just do it the way everybody else does it, And I'd load the JavaScript in the head or somewhere like that. And later on, that came back to bite me because in different places in Moodle, it wouldn't load my JavaScript, or sometimes it would load it multiple times, and it would really slow down a browser. So you need to really be familiar with how Moodle loads JavaScript in order to use it properly. And I've included a link there, which actually has all that information. So I don't think I'm going to go into that here because it's quite complex, and I think it's a good case for just-in-time learning. When you need to learn this, you should go and figure out how to do it. But basically, you'll declare your JavaScript inside module.js, and your function names will probably look like m.componentName. Here's your component name again, and then your function name. So in the case here, I've got mod quiz init attempt form. So init attempt form is the function name, and the name of the module is mod quiz, and m is it's the global name or namespace for these modules that Moodle loads up. And it's done this way, of course, so that you don't have JavaScript conflicts. So that works very nicely. Moodle loads the JavaScript up in the footer of your site, so it's the last thing to load on the page. So you'll notice when you load a Moodle page, particularly the course page, it takes a long time for the links and things to become active. Or sometimes you'll notice that there's an HTML5 audio player, and it suddenly gets replaced by a Flash one. Okay, this is because JavaScript is the last thing to load. It loads up last, and then it kicks off and starts doing all that it has to do. And that's because Moodle is trying to speed things up for you by letting the page load first and then the JavaScript second. And I had a situation a few months ago where somebody couldn't get my stuff to work, and they were saying, I can't get it to work, I can't get it to work, I can't get it to work, and they'd hacked Moodle to pieces. They'd hacked it to smithereens. And what they'd actually done was to clean up the look of their Moodle site. They actually completely cut off the footer. They had where the footer was rendered in the quiz. They put comments in front of wherever the functions were to render the footer. So the footer wasn't loading, and that meant none of the JavaScript was actually loading, which meant that none of the Flash modules or the widgets and things were actually appearing on the page. So just be aware that that is how Moodle loads JavaScript, and when you need to do that, go and have a look at these JavaScript guidelines, and that should tell you how to do it. Okay, then you've got the database folder, or the DB folder, and the name is a little bit misleading because it actually does a whole lot more. Oh my goodness, we're running out of time, because it actually does a whole lot more than just do the database stuff. So I think there's 5 files that you might find in there. There may even be more. These are just the ones that I know of. There's install.xml, which contains the definitions for your database tables. There's access.php, which declares capabilities for your plugin. Okay, this is really nothing to do with the database, but it's really important because this allows people really fine-grained access for who can access your icon on the Atto editor, or who can do this or that. You've got upgrade.php for upgrading your plugin. Events.PHP, you can hook into Moodle events, and then you've got uninstall.php. So if your plugin needs to do anything when you uninstall it, then that's what you put there. Just talk about 1 or 2 of those in a bit more detail. This is the install.xml file. This is an example of one. Okay, you can just see what it is. It's an XML file that describes the database tables that your plugin needs. Now, you're encouraged to use Moodle's XML DB editor to do this rather than do it by hand, because it'll do it perfectly for you. And in fact, if you have a MySQL table with your plugin table already set up, you can actually reverse engineer it and actually create your XML file from that table, which is cool. Then we've got the upgrade.php script. So you could probably put things here that are not in fact database upgrades, just other bits and pieces you need to do in your upgrade. You've added or changed something, but it's usually used for database upgrades. And this is called after Moodle spots a higher version in version.php. And most of the time it's a list of, if this version is less than this version, do this. Or if this version is greater than this version, do this. So if you look at some of the older modules, you'll see a lot of upgrade scripts, and it's a good way of a long list of upgrade kind of functions, adding tables and removing tables and fields. It's a good place to go and get ideas for how to do things. But the version number is key here. So this is another example of the importance of getting the version.php right, because it will look for a higher version, and when it spots a higher version, then Moodle will go through the upgrade process for you. And the access.php, so this is where you can declare capabilities for your plugin. So I use this for the TinyMC editors and the editor icons and the Atto editor icons, so that you can declare a capability. For example, can they see this icon? So the icon is visible, and a context. So context is course context or user context, site context, and then the administrator can later on go and change those capabilities using the Moodle menu system, and it works very nicely. So, for example, you may not want the students to see an icon for recording a video, but you do want the teachers to see an icon for recording video. And in that case, you could just change the capability. And adding those features like that really makes Moodle administrators happy. Okay, if you haven't got them, it's a bit annoying. And in actual fact, on the core plugins for the TinyMC editor, and I think even for the Atto editor, they don't have capabilities set up. And that is probably something that should be done, and I should just write a tracker and do it, but I don't. I'm going really quick, so I'm just wondering how are we all going there. I haven't got much response. Are people still with me, or am I going a bit fast? All here? Still here? All good? Okay. All right, good. Thanks, guys. That's great. So in the events.php, which is also in the DB folder, you can hook into Moodle events and respond to them in your plugin. And that's a really good thing to do. But to do that, you kind of need to know what events there are. And those events are listed here in this URL here. This, by the way, this PDF is actually available on the page for this presentation on iMoot 2014's website. So you can just download that, and you'll have all this information without having to write it down or anything. The event system in Moodle has changed recently, so I have in fact not updated my plugins to use the new event system. But the screenshot here is actually from the new events API. It uses the new events API. But in one of the plugins that I'm responsible for, which I didn't originally write, this is it's a hub plugin, and we actually have courses which we have a regular hub, but then people who visit our site can actually go onto those courses that have been uploaded to the hub and actually use those courses. And so they can actually try them out before they download the courses from that hub. And to make all of that work, we have an event where when a user is added to the system or a course is uploaded into the system, an event is fired by Moodle, and our plugin listens to that event and then goes and adds that user to all the courses, or if it's a new course, adds all the users on the system to that one course. That's an example of how we use the event system. And Moodle has really done a big upgrade on the event system. You'll be able to get much more informative events, and there's more things you can do with them. So for plugin developers, this is a bit of an opportunity to do some good stuff. And the lang folder. Most of you will probably be aware of the lang folder because it contains the language resources, and I think it's quite impressive because most of the plugins that you see are not just hard-coded strings. In fact, almost every plugin I've seen, uses the language folders properly, and probably that's one really good thing about Moodle, and one of the many good things about Moodle, is that the internationalization is very simple. Even for something like WordPress, where everything is generally pretty simple, it's not quite as easy to implement as on Moodle. So you just have a folder for each language, so EN for English, JA I think for Japanese, and then the language file should be UTF-8 encoded, and then it's just declared as in the screenshots there. And to pick up those strings, you just put get string, then the name of the string that you're looking for, and then once again your all-important component name. You should declare your plugin name as one of those strings. I think that's pretty much the only thing that you really have to do. The backup folder. Well, I won't talk a whole lot about the backup folder because we've done a lot of talking anyway. But this is where you can specify how you want your module data to be backed up and restored. Okay. Actually, as I was looking for this, I was quite interested to see that backup and restore is actually not that easy at all. It's not, I don't think it was that easy, but there on Moodle.org they said, in order to work with restore to, you must read backup to for developers. Everything will be crystal clear once you've read it. So there you go. Bold words indeed. Some of the other things you'll find in there is styles.css. You don't actually have to include styles.css. If you declare it, if you write it, and you put it in your plugin folder, Moodle will spot that, find it, and load it for you. So you don't have to do anything. Just start declaring your various styles that you want for your plugin. The pics folder, this should contain an icon for your plugin. It should be a 16 by 16 icon.gif, should be called icon.gif. In actual fact, icon.png works pretty good, and if you have a different size, that seems to work as well. They've changed things a little bit, but officially it should be a 16 by 16 GIF called icon.gif. The last thing I want to talk about in terms of just development is globals. So Moodle stores a lot of useful data in several key global objects, and they're here. You can see them there. The three most important ones are the CFG, DB, and user. The config allows you to get all the configuration information, which actually is if you look at any plugin, it's just peppered with calls to .cfg, and the database abstracts a lot of boring SQL and chances for making errors and mistakes away from you, so you can do it quite simply. So let's have a look at the global. There's lots of information in the global.cfg, and actually, as I was writing this document, I realized, for all these cheat sheets that we've got, the JavaScript cheat sheets and the PHP cheat sheets, but we don't really have a Moodle cheat sheet. And boy, we could do with that. So that's probably something I should get on and do, or somebody else could do, because just all the things that are in the various places, having them on one page would be really nice, especially for new developers. So some of the ones that you'll use are www.root. That gives you the URL basically of your Moodle site. Your Moodle. So if your site goes to mysite.com and then Moodle is in my site /Moodle, it'll give you the URL to mysite.com/Moodle. Then you've got the path on your system to that same folder. Okay, so don't make a mistake. This is the URL and this is the path. And then this is the path to the LIB directory, and this is the path to your data root. Okay, so that's where you store your Moodle data. And then there's a path to your temp directory, so you may upload files into your temp directory of Moodle, and you'll get that temp directory from here. And then we have the database global object, the DB. So this is really powerful and actually makes coding a lot easier, really, because you don't have to learn a lot of SQL for the simple tasks. It kind of brings up to a higher level so that you can just write it in PHP, and the data comes back as an object, and you can just use it right away. So I put a couple of examples of database functions that are in the database object, and there's a link there too, so you can see more details on those. But the top one there, I've got a get record, and that will return. You see it's got DB get record, and then user, that's the table, and then what follows there is a list of conditions. So the ID field must equal 2 in this case, and then it will return an object. Probably you can actually specify as a third, but here I've skipped a parameter what to do if there's more than one, or if there are no objects that match those conditions. but I think the default is just to return the first one. And you'll get a user. You'll actually get an object back. So it'll be the user object, and you can put a user object and then access the members of that object, first name, last name, etc. directly from there. And then the next one below that, I've got get records. And the interesting thing to note here is that this will return multiple records, and it does the same thing. It accesses the files table in this case, and then the conditions. The file area field of that table must equal draft, and the user ID must equal what I put there is the global user object and ID. So here you can see I've used the global user object, and that will get the currently logged in user, the user who is doing all this. It will get their user ID and put it in there. So you'll often see database calls that look like that. Update record, okay, it's a similar thing, the table name, and then in this case an object. So you probably want to have an ID there, probably an ID with the ID of the actual object, so Moodle knows which database we're updating, which table we're updating, sorry, which record of the table we're updating, and then various fields that you want to update. And we've got a set field. So in this case, we will set a field. So this will set the first name field of the user table. In every case that the first name is Richard, we'll turn that user into Dick. Okay, so you're going to create a lot of Dicks. And that's the set field function. So you can see it's really nice because you don't have to do all the funky SQL. You can actually just stay in PHP and let Moodle handle all the details for you, which is really, really good. Just one note here is that the table name here doesn't contain the prefix. So if you're coming from something like WordPress or something where you might need to know what the prefix of the table is, Moodle will just figure that out for you because the information is in the config file. Okay, so you just put the stub of the table name, not the full table name as you'd see it in MySQL or something like that. Okay, where are we now? Just the last thing I think is how to use those globals. Well, in most cases, if you're using a template or you're working from an existing module that you've just changed, you won't actually have to worry about this. But if you're doing something a little bit more intense, then you'll need to add either defined Moodle internal //i if your file is being included by some other Moodle, some other file. Okay, and that will actually make sure that your module actually has the global and everything all loaded up for you. If you're accessing your file directly from a browser, so let's say you've got a file that's going to load up in an iframe, which is something I do sometimes for the Atto or the TinyMCD plugins, then you want to actually load up the config file directly. And so to do that, you'll put a string in like this, require _dir_ and then the path to config.php. That particular path will actually change, won't it, depending on how deep you are in the directory system within your specific plugin. Okay, and once you've actually added those to the top of your file, then the globals are all loaded and ready to go. You just need to call them at the top of your function so they're accessible within your function. And to do that, you've got globals, $CFG, or whatever it might be. Just list the globals that you need. And in actual fact, everywhere you look in Moodle, you'll see people calling these globals. So if you ever forget or aren't sure how to do this, just have a look at some other plugins and it should be pretty clear. All right. And here I had let's do it. I was planning to do this in real time, but we've gone way longer than I thought. And perhaps if there aren't too many questions, I could actually do this and do the screen sharing. But I might just open the floor now for questions and see what people have to say, have to ask. And if there's anybody who's listening who actually has a better answer to a question than me, please chime in. So this is a situation I often get in my my English classes when I was teaching English. You know, the guest speaker comes and then after they finish their presentation, they say any questions, and there's no questions, and I, as a teacher, would cringe. You know, and I have to walk around, tap students on the shoulder, and say, "Ask a question." Yes. Stunned silence. Actually, it's fine. But if there's any questions, just ask them now. If there aren't questions, I'll go on. And if you want to just do something else, that's fine. Or yeah, I'll just show how to do this thing. All right. Well, let's do that. Let's do it. Let's try what we tried before and see if we can get it to work. I'm sure it will. So let's share my desktop. And we'll go full screen this time. Come on, we'll do it. Sorry about that, everybody. I was you lost me again. Sorry about that. So if you're still there, I won't do the screen sharing again. I think I'm jinxed, but we hope we got through our session. So I hope that you got enough information there. Yes. But Teresa, if you had stuff to say, yeah, you can take over if you want. Probably be quite good at it. Like. Okay. Okay. Yes. Well, I could talk on and on and on. So I guess there's some people still here. If you do want to. If you have a question, you want me to talk on about something, I will talk on about something. If not, I guess we'll just close it down.
Hey Justin, it's Shane here. I'll sort of just jump out at this point where there's some silence just to say, just formally say thank you on the whole iMoot team for sharing. And I know for me, because I've been doing development for a long time with Moodle, but it's great seeing someone else present it on it and got some great tips from you. So awesome. So I think it helped everybody. But by all means, keep going if you want to go. There's at least 25 minutes till the next session starts anyway, so if you want to keep going or people have got questions, that's welcome to keep going.
Right, yes. Yeah. Yes, well, I could keep on talking, but I haven't got any more slides that you haven't seen yet, so and not so many questions. So perhaps I'll just call it quits, I guess. But thank you very much, everybody, for coming along and attending the presentation. I was glad to do it, and I think it was a good process because I realised that it's actually quite difficult to put it all into one presentation. There's a lot to talk about, and I think there is a real lack of information for plugin developers, new people especially. I think it can be a bit intimidating getting started with people. But I did read just yesterday on Twitter, I think, that Helen, well, on Moodle forums, that David Mudrak has been appointed the Plugins Liaison Officer at Moodle HQ. I don't think there actually was the position of Plugins Liaison Officer until that. So that's really good because I think we'll have a go-to guy now for various things that you might want to talk about. Yeah, so that's something that's quite interesting and has happened in the plugin world. And I plan to put a few more templates up for people and post a little bit more information that's a bit probably a little bit more step by step on various parts of the process. Today was a bit of an overview really of some things. Okay, thank you very much everybody for coming. I'm going to sign off then, and I hope you all have a very good day, and maybe see you in some of the other sessions here on iMoot.